Jessica itu kan kayak setan itu. Deep inside is something like the evil gitu.
Kasus kopi cyanida ini mungkin bisa dibandingkan dengan O.J. Simpson.
Harus saya buktikan kebenarannya.
Kasus ini terlalu banyak sisi dan terlalu banyak rumor. Ada rumor ada cinta segitiga antara Jessica, Mirna, dan juga suaminya. Ada kaitannya dengan mafia.
What makes one poison the other?
Kalau dia tidak bersalah, silahkan bebaskan dia.
He is the killer.
On the 27th of October 2016, Indonesians had been waiting for months to witness the outcome of a case dubbed the Trial of the Century, likened to a long-running television drama with millions tuning in daily. The defendant, Jessica Wongso, a 28-year-old Australian resident of Indonesian descent, stood accused of poisoning her best friend by spiking her coffee with cyanide in broad daylight at a high-end café in central Jakarta. The case sharply divided Indonesian society. For the upper class, Jessica was innocent, a victim of a corrupt system. They believed she was framed, though without concrete evidence. In contrast, the general populace saw her as a manipulative, wealthy individual trying to escape a murder charge. Jessica's enigmatic smiles and nonchalant remarks made viewers uneasy. Throughout the trial, she frequently smiled and seemed to relish the public's attention. Even at press conferences, she appeared more like a game show winner than someone facing serious charges. Prosecutors were adamant about pursuing the death penalty for Jessica. Ultimately, the judge found Jessica Wongso guilty of murdering her friend, Wongso Mirna Salihin. How had their friendship soured to the extent that Jessica would act against Mirna? Born in 1988 in Jakarta, Wongso Mirna Salihin was a strikingly beautiful and confident woman who drew people to her. She came from a close-knit family and had a twin sister named Sandy. Supported by her family and surrounded by friends, Mirna was preparing for a happy marriage. She was often the center of attention among her friends. While studying at Beauty Blue College in Australia, including a fellow student named Jessica Wongso, also an Indonesian international student and Mirna's closest friend during their university days, Jessica was born into an ultra-wealthy family in Jakarta. Her family owned a major plastic importing business, reputedly the largest distributor in Australia, leading many to call her father the Plastic King. However, in an interview, her mother refuted this claim. Her parents moved to Sydney in 2005, living in the luxurious suburb of Double Bay, while Jessica stayed behind in Jakarta to finish high school, living with a housekeeper. Both women led intriguing lives. They shared common backgrounds as Indonesians from the upper class who attended expensive international schools in Jakarta. Now they were studying abroad together. Their lives had many similarities, but the key difference between them was their personalities. Mirna was extremely sociable, whereas Jessica was more reserved and introverted. University friends noted that Jessica was not the type to easily make friends with everyone, so when she did make a friend, she was very diligent about maintaining that friendship. Alongside Mirna and Jessica, their close-knit group included two other girls, Hani and Vera, also from Indonesia. The four women from Jakarta enjoyed an active social life in Sydney, attending lectures by day and partying by night. Everything changed after they graduated. Each had their own plans and personal lives to lead. Mirna became engaged to her boyfriend, Arief Suemako, who had also lived in Australia, and planned to return to Indonesia to start her career and a family with Arief. Both Hani and Vera eventually moved back to Indonesia. Jessica became an Australian resident and stayed in Sydney where her family lived, thus temporarily parting ways with her friends for quite a long period. 1 month prior to the day of the murder, Jessica and her friends had set up a WhatsApp group before Jessica left Sydney to fly back to Jakarta. From this chat group, the girls organized a meetup at a café named Olivier, a high-end venue frequented by Jakarta's elite, located within the Grand Indonesia shopping center. On January 6, 2016, in this chat, Mirna expressed her fondness for Vietnamese iced coffee available at Olivier, unaware that it would soon be used as a weapon to end her life. The girls arranged to meet at 5 p.m. Security cameras at the cafe captured Jessica arriving early at 3:30 p.m. She walked around, surveying the cafe briefly before leaving 2 minutes later. At this point, Jessica texted her friends to inform them that she had arrived. She returned at 4:14 p.m. with 3 large bags, purportedly gifts for her friends, and began ordering drinks. She ordered 2 cocktails and 1 Vietnamese iced coffee, then chose table number 54 in a non-smoking area. This table had a large half-moon-shaped sofa behind it, flanked by tall plants that significantly obstructed the camera's view from behind. As Jessica approached, she placed the 3 large bags on the table, effectively blocking the view of the front camera, making it impossible to see anything on the table. At 4:24 p.m., the drinks were served to Jessica, and she notified her friends that she had ordered. About 10 minutes later, it is believed that she then added cyanide to Mirna's coffee based on security footage. At 5:16 p.m., Mirna arrived with Hani, and after a brief stop at the reception, they were directed to Jessica's waiting table. The girls reunited with hugs and quickly sat down. Mirna was seated in the middle, with Jessica and Hani on either side. By this time, the drinks were already on the table. Jessica told Mirna that the iced coffee was hers, as Mirna had previously mentioned liking it. Shortly after, Mirna took a sip of her melting iced coffee and immediately sensed something was off. She set the coffee down and remarked to both Jessica and Hani that the coffee was terrible. Mirna then asked Hani to taste it. Hani only sniffed the coffee, agreeing with Mirna that it had a bitter and very strong taste. Mirna also turned to Jessica, suggesting she try it, but Jessica declined. The coffee remained untouched as the girls, bewildered, tried to understand what had just happened. Mirna began waving her hands in front of her face as if she had smelled something extremely unpleasant and suddenly collapsed backwards. She began convulsing and foaming at the mouth, sending the surroundings into a state of panic. The waitstaff and the manager, Devi Siagian, rushed to assist Mirna and Hani, but Jessica alone remained silent and inactive, offering no aid to her friend. At that moment, Devi Siagian thought Mirna was having an epileptic seizure. She ordered her staff to call an ambulance and bring oxygen to help, but she was startled when Jessica, who was standing nearby, stepped closer and asked, "What did you put in Mirna's coffee?" This comment immediately aroused Siagian's suspicion, as it was the first time such a life-threatening incident related to a beverage had occurred at Olivier. Siagian immediately instructed the staff to retain the coffee cup and seal it for investigation. Following this, Devi Siagian and a barista named Ranga Saputro examined the coffee and confirmed that Mirna's drink was no longer just a normal cup of coffee. Hani then called Arief to inform him of Mirna's critical condition. Arief was shocked and hurried to the hospital where the ambulance had taken Mirna, located in central Jakarta. By the time Mirna was admitted, she had already passed away, and despite the doctor's desperate efforts, nothing could be changed. Mirna Salihin was declared dead at 6:30 p.m. on January 6, 2016. Mirna's family and friends were completely shocked, unable to comprehend how she could die so suddenly. Upon learning about her final moments, suspicion immediately fell on Jessica. Yet it was hard to believe that a close friend, a woman of the upper class with high education like Jessica, could truly be the perpetrator of such a crime, committed in broad daylight at a crowded place. Following the declaration of her death, Mirna's body remained at the hospital. It was not until January 9th, 2016, that her family moved her from the hospital to a funeral home. However, the police unexpectedly intervened, requesting the family's permission to conduct an autopsy. Initially, Mirna's family resisted, unwilling to permit any potential damage to her body. But ultimately, they conceded when the police expressed suspicion that Mirna's death was likely due to poisoning, and that without an autopsy, the perpetrator would remain unknown. By the early hours of January 10, 2016, Mirna's body was returned to her family and the funeral proceedings resumed. The police released autopsy results showing a small amount of 0.22 milliliters of cyanide in Mirna's stomach. They concluded that she had been poisoned. Furthermore, tests on the coffee cup revealed a substantial amount of the toxin, nearly 300 milligrams of cyanide, enough to kill an average person. Additionally, Jessica appeared neither panicked nor attempted to assist Mirna as she became unconscious. Consequently, the police began investigating Jessica, making her the prime suspect in the case. After a period of investigation, on January 30th, 2016, police arrested Jessica at a hotel in North Jakarta, charging her with premeditated murder, potentially facing the death penalty. For those unaware, cyanide is among the deadliest poisons, commonly found in natural foods like cassava and bamboo shoots. Upon exposure, cyanide enters the bloodstream and prevents cells from absorbing oxygen. This blockage causes unassimilated oxygen to flood the blood, turning the skin cherry red, while the organs fail to receive oxygen, leading to organ failure, convulsions, coma, and ultimately death. What drove Jessica Wongso? As the police investigation into Jessica intensified, so did media interest in the case, catapulting what would have been a routine criminal affair into the spotlight. This made it a daily fixture on Indonesian television. But the most baffling aspect remained Jessica's motive for murder. Lacking a clear explanation, people began to speculate about the fractures in the friendship between the two women, Mirna and Jessica. The situation deteriorated around October 2014 when Mirna visited Sydney for a vacation and informed Jessica about her trip. The two arranged to have dinner, expected to be a joyful reunion of close friends, but it was not to be. During the meal, Mirna suggested that Jessica should break up with her Australian boyfriend, Patrick O'Connor, whom she believed was a waste of Jessica's time. Patrick was known to be a drug addict and frequently violent, posing a serious risk to Jessica. Mirna, known for her forthrightness, perhaps spoke too harshly, causing considerable discomfort to Jessica. Throughout the conversation, Jessica remained silent, and once Mirna finished speaking, Jessica simply stood up from the table and left Mirna alone in the restaurant without a word of farewell. After dinner, Mirna's discomfort with Jessica grew. She told her fiancé, Arif, whom she had not yet married, that she no longer wished to meet Jessica alone. If future meetings were to happen, Mirna insisted on having Arif or one of their mutual friends, Hani or Vera, accompany her. However, as Mirna and Jessica were residing in different countries, their communication dwindled. It seems that after that meeting, Jessica began to exhibit bizarre and worrying behavior. Throughout 2015, Jessica was hospitalized 5 times following unsuccessful attempts at suicide and self-harm. In August, she drove while intoxicated and crashed into a nursing home in Sydney. She was subsequently hospitalized with a fractured rib and several chest injuries. Approximately 2 months later, Jessica's boyfriend, Patrick, called the police to report that Jessica had attempted to poison herself with carbon monoxide from a barbecue in her bedroom, but fortunately, she survived unscathed. 2 weeks later, police were called to Jessica's apartment again. This time, they found an empty bottle of whiskey next to her bed, along with several letters. One letter claimed that Patrick O'Connor was responsible for her death. Other letters addressed to her family and employer included confidential contents. By the end of November, Patrick had endured enough. He sought a restraining order against Jessica. He claimed she had sent him numerous voice messages and texts threatening to harm herself and had been harassing his friends and family. Considering the severity of Jessica's actions, the police granted Patrick an emergency protective order. Jessica was due to face trial in Sydney in February 2017 for drink driving. Her troubles compounded as she was dismissed from her job as a graphic designer at New South Wales Ambulance, where she had worked for a considerable time post-graduation. In these trying times, Jessica decided to return to Jakarta to start afresh. Before leaving, she set up a WhatsApp group with her friends. Jessica sent the first message on December 5, 2015, before departing Sydney. A few days later, Mirna responded, and Jessica arranged a meeting which Mirna agreed to attend. On December 12, 2015, Mirna and her newlywed husband Arief joined Jessica for dinner at a restaurant in North Jakarta. They had recently celebrated a lavish wedding in Bali. The dinner went smoothly, although Jessica mentioned it was the first time she had heard about Mirna and Arief's wedding. Previously, Mirna had become more cautious around Jessica and had decided not to invite her to the wedding. This may have made the dinner conversation somewhat awkward. Although not much is known about that evening, the people of Indonesia and the prosecutors at Jessica's trial believed that Jessica felt angry and jealous of Mirna's prosperous life, leading her to plan the murder of her friend. They were convinced that Jessica was the perpetrator and sought justice for Mirna. However, many contradictions arose during the trial, complicating the case and prolonging it for months. The trial of Jessica Kumala Wongso. After a prolonged period of detention, the trial of Jessica Kumala Wongso commenced on June 15, 2016, and spanned over 4 months due to discrepancies in testimonies and evidence concerning her role as the perpetrator. Jessica's family retained the services of Otto Hasibuan, a renowned and seasoned lawyer in Indonesia, to defend her. A pivotal aspect of the case was the cause of death by cyanide poisoning. However, the incomplete autopsy on Mirna created significant challenges in reaching a judicial conclusion. Dr. Slamet Purnomo, who was responsible for the autopsy, reported finding a mere 0.2 mg of cyanide in Mirna's stomach, detected 3 days post-mortem. The hospital had not conducted a full autopsy at the request of the police. The prosecution explained that at that time in Indonesia, there was immense respect for the deceased's handling, and a full autopsy, which involves dissection from head to toe, could compromise the body's integrity, hence requiring parental consent. Mirna's parents did not authorize a complete autopsy, allowing only for samples to be taken. A documentary released last year by Netflix included a letter from the police requesting a full autopsy on Mirna's body and recording the testimony. The defense then brought forward medical experts to testify that Mirna's death was not due to cyanide poisoning, stating that the lethal dose ranges between 50–176 milligrams, thus the 0.2 milligram found was insufficient to cause death. The first forensic witness, Dr. Jaja Surya Atmaja, a medical doctor and forensic pathology researcher, as well as a senior lecturer at the University of Indonesia in Jakarta, asserted in court that without examining all internal organs, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death since other potential causes such as stroke or heart and lung-related diseases could not be ruled out. Dr. Jaja Surya Atmaja also reiterated the importance of autopsies in establishing the basis for conclusions in suspicious death cases during a discussion with medical professionals. Another expert, Professor Beng Beng Ong, a toxicologist invited from Australia, confirmed that the claim of death by cyanide was unfounded and urged consideration of other natural causes. The prosecution attempted to discredit Beng Beng Ong by accusing him of abusing his tourist visa. Subsequently, Ong was expelled from Indonesia and banned from entry for 6 months, rendering his testimonies ineffective and dismissed. However, it was noted that in 2002, Beng Beng Ong was invited to Indonesia to help identify victims of the first Bali bombing, while on a tourist visa as well. This raised suspicions about whether the prosecutors and judges were truly upholding justice or merely striving to legally incriminate Jessica. In the trial, Dr. Jaja Surya Atmadja testified that he was the first doctor to see Mirna's body 2 hours after her death. At that time, her face was blue, whereas individuals who die from cyanide poisoning typically exhibit red discoloration. He further asserted that there was no trace of cyanide in Mirna's stomach fluid, liver bile, or urine when the autopsy was conducted, 70 minutes post-mortem. Dr. Atmadja also suggested that the detected 2 mils of cyanide could have been a result of embalming chemicals. Following the revelation about Mirna's blue complexion, her family swiftly provided photos showing her face as red, taken on the day of her funeral. However, this evidence was dismissed by the court. Proving Jessica's guilt or innocence became exceedingly difficult due to the absence of direct evidence linking her to the crime. Her defense attorney, Otto Hasibuan, argued that the prosecution failed to present a coherent narrative in their indictment. They did not clarify how Jessica could have obtained the cyanide, where she stored it in the café, or produce any footage showing Jessica actually administering the cyanide to Mirna's coffee. Furthermore, the crucial piece of evidence, Mirna's coffee cup, was not properly sealed, and no records were kept about this key evidence in the case file. After being handed over to the police, the contents of the coffee cup were transferred to another container without any record of the time, method, or witnesses to this unsealing, as previously claimed. The arguments presented by Hasibuan and Jessica's defense team led many to shift their support towards Jessica, believing she was not the culprit. Yet, this did not prompt a more thorough review of the case. The prosecutors and judges struggled to find direct evidence to convict Jessica. Consequently, they resorted to using circumstantial evidence. One such piece of evidence was Jessica's alleged study of the cafe's security cameras. Prosecutors accused her of having scoped out the cafe's layout and being aware of the security camera placements. Later, she left and visited a Bath and Body Works store within the same shopping center as Olivier and purchased 3 types of bath salts, asking the staff to pack them in 3 large bags. This led to the second piece of circumstantial evidence regarding Jessica's placement of the bags. A psychologist named Antonia noted that Jessica's behavior while waiting for her friends was unusual. Typically, when people enter a restaurant, they place their belongings beside them, especially if adjacent seats are empty. However, Jessica placed the 3 paper bags on the table before arranging them, with the ordered drinks positioned behind these bags. Next were Jessica's suspicious actions. At 4:29 p.m., she opened her handbag with both hands, her head constantly turning left and right as if monitoring the movements captured by the security camera. She appeared to place something on the table, an act pointed out by expert Mohammed Nuh Al-Azhar. The fourth point of concern was Jessica's refusal to taste the coffee after Mirna took a sip and remarked that it tasted awful, urging Jessica to try it, but Jessica declined. The fifth detail was Jessica's scratching her thigh. At around 5:23 p.m., while the staff at Olivier were attempting to assist Mirna in an emergency, Jessica simply stood there, continuously rubbing and scratching her palm as she held her handbag, and then proceeded to rub her right thigh. Suspicion towards Jessica heightened when it was discovered that she had instructed her housekeeper to dispose of the trousers she wore that day. Later, her mother told the press that the trousers were thrown away because they were torn. The most crucial piece of evidence emerged regarding Jessica's mental health instability. Indonesian police requested collaboration with Australian police to investigate Jessica's life in Australia. The Australian police agreed once it was assured that Jessica would not face the death penalty. Subsequently, they reported several incidents related to Jessica's adverse behaviors, including intentions of homicide, suicide, and threats of self-harm. Indonesian police also conducted a 9-hour interview with Jessica's supervisor at New South Wales, where she had previously worked. The supervisor, Christy Carter, acknowledged that Jessica was capable of causing harm or even killing someone. During a hospital recovery visit after one of Jessica's suicide attempts, Christy visited Jessica, who confessed that if she wanted to kill someone, she knew how to do it. She was familiar with using guns and the correct dosages of poison necessary to act. Just 2 months before the murder took place, Jessica had threatened that Christy and her mother must die. With reports detailing Jessica's troubled life in Sydney presented in court, perhaps the clearest revelation emerged about the perilous nature hidden behind Jessica's smile. Several psychologists involved in the case described Jessica as a manipulative and self-centered individual. However, details about her life and relationships prior to these events remain scant, casting a shadow over her true character. Consequently, Jessica was found guilty of murdering her friend, Mirna Salihin, and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Despite this, Jessica's defense team steadfastly maintained her innocence, unable to alter the verdict once it was delivered. The case reached its conclusion. Subsequently, Jessica and her lawyer made multiple appeals, all of which were rejected by the Supreme Court. Even attempts to interview Jessica in prison later were denied. To date, Jessica has served over 7 years in prison, continuing to assert her innocence. Recent updates revealed that Otto Hasibuan suggested to Jessica that he could secure her release by persuading the president of Indonesia, provided she confessed to the crime. Jessica adamantly refused, insisting she would not admit to something she hadn't done. The complexity of the case has left many questions unanswered. Concurrently, various theories circulated among the Indonesian public. One theory suggested that Jessica was framed by the police team leading the investigation. This theory gained traction, especially after Ferdi Sambo, a former high-ranking national police officer known for fabricating evidence in past cases, was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2023 following his orchestration of a murder to look like a shootout. This cast doubts on the integrity of the case due to discrepancies in autopsy timings and the preservation of evidence such as the coffee cup. A more prevalent theory posits that either Mirna's father or husband orchestrated her murder to claim over $5 million in life insurance. This hypothesis emerged amid significant public scrutiny and was supported by media disclosures. Specifically before the trial, Devi Siagian, Rangga Saputro and Mirna's father reportedly met privately to align their testimonies about the case. Although Devi Siagian and Rangga could recount the case details to the police, they claimed to have forgotten the meeting with Mirna's father. Additionally, during the trial, lawyer Otto Hasibuan alleged that Rangga was seen receiving a black bag from RAF just before the murder took place. This concludes what transpired in the notorious 2016 coffee cup poisoning case in Indonesia. Thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.